Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today, we've got an incredible guest, an incredible woman with us. We've actually never met in real life, but we've been like Instagram buddies for quite a while, just cheering on one another behind the scenes, which is bloody awesome. So please let me welcome you, Soph Allen from the Train with Soph. Now, Soph, before we get started and we dive into our conversation today, could you please tell our listeners a short or long summary of who you are, what exactly it is that you do, and most importantly, what is your favorite dessert and why?
That is starting with the important questions. So thank you so much for having me. I hope people are enjoying the sunshine, but if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, it might not be shining as brightly as it is in Australia today. So a bit of a background, I guess, from the last 3 years, I have been in fitness. Prior to that, I was working in architecture and marketing. So a little bit of a random background, but I just fell in love with fitness and training when I started my own journey and got into it, and really loved helping people and educating people. And it was really what I was spending my time researching and studying. And I feel like what you do in your spare time for free is really indicative of where, you know, you're likely to get paid to do something that doesn't really feel as much like work as work may have. So I got qualified as a PT a few years ago, and then I started my business Train with Soph, which is a female fitness platform. It's an online app, big community worldwide, just helping women build confidence, really get strong in the gym, perfect their technique, do it whilst being empowered through education, because I was very misinformed coming up through my personal journey. And I essentially created something that I wish I had when I had started, because there was a lot of confusion, and there's still a lot of confusion despite there being so much access to content. Anyone can post about, you know, how to get strong or how to lose weight. It's not regulated, right? So making sure I'm putting out really good content for the girls and helping women in their journeys. And that's what brings us today. I guess, you know, my business has gone through many different iterations, which I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation, but that's what I do and that's what I'm passionate about. And yeah, that's me, I guess. If you want to know a bit about me, I started out like so many women, feeling really lacking confidence and not really liking what I saw in the mirror, which is really, you know, why a lot of us get started, and then we end up falling in love with the process and the journey and realizing it's less about what we look like and more about how we feel. And so I just started getting into fitness, and that turned into me competing in a bikini competition, to then rebounding, to then gaining more weight, to then being in a really bad position with my relationship with food and myself and my weight. And I started social media, you know, way back in 2015, and sharing that has been really challenging, especially being a coach and feeling like that affects your credibility by gaining weight. But getting through that now and being in a really good place, I'm really glad I went through those things. So there's, you know, a semi-quick snapshot of who I am.
I love it. That's so good. And I love that you opened up about your journey from bodybuilding to, you know, the diets that you went through and the transition that you've made right now from, you know, being your smaller self to your stronger self right now, and how that's transition. I want us to talk about that, because that's been on my mind coming to this conversation. You know, so many of us from a young age, we get triggered by the scales. We get triggered by how much we weigh, the way we look, the way we are perceived. What are some, I guess, the word that I'm looking for is like, what are some revelations that you've had since this transition has happened?
I think this one's been, because I've had so many times where I've gotten super lean and then gained weight and regained weight and then regained more weight. I think the initial lesson prior to this, sort of last 6 to 12 months was when I came out of a dieting phase, and I was very attached with the numbers and what the scale was saying and allowing it to mean something about a success or a failure on my part. And when I did start to regain weight and my lifts started going up in the gym, I was like, oh, I think there's a different relationship here. It's not like the scale and what I look like isn't adding up, because now I'm gaining weight because I was getting stronger, but I was also eating more food. And I was like, I actually think I look better this way. And then, of course, there's the layer of social media, which positively reinforces, typically a leaner body. But because I started to get strong, people were really sort of pro that. And that was, that was good. That was good that people were like, oh, cool, gaining weight, and, making the positive association to that. But then at the point I'm at, 6 months ago, where I then gained a lot of weight, and there was a lot of factors contributing to that happening. Look, I'm not going to lie and say all these amazing things happen and it broke down, the relationship with me and the scale, because I stopped weighing myself, because I felt like that was unhelpful and that was contributing to negative feelings towards myself and painting myself in a negative picture. And I really started working on a lot of self-acceptance and expanding who I was beyond what I looked like or how I performed in the gym or what my photos looked like. And that was the important lesson, I think. There were quite a few, but the main one being removing myself from this perception that had been created through my social media platform that, oh, I'm that fitness girl, or I'm the girl that has the really big glutes, whatever it might be that people come to me for. And instead of looking at that and being like, well, this picture gets the most likes, so I align with being this, figure, being like, oh, you know what, there's actually so much more to me. And I focused a lot on my education actually and learning, and it made me a better coach for two reasons. One, because I can really relate to women who go through this experience. I've been through so many different phases with my weight. And two, I spent more time educating myself and learning about what I was going through, but also things unrelated to what I was going through, in order to expand on the kind of person I was and the skills and habits that I had. And that was really powerful. And now, sort of at the point I'm at now, it's so funny to think back to 6 months ago when I had gained that weight, and I was like, oh my God, like, what's going to happen? I don't want to become, someone who has to be like, oh, I'm a like body positivity account now, and I can't speak about dieting. And it felt really weird that I was trying to lump myself into these boxes. And I was like, I will never accept where I'm at. Like, I just refuse to do it. And then now where I'm at now, I'm like, oh, wow, I really resisted going through that and feeling those feelings and emotions. And I'm so glad that I pushed myself to stay at maintenance and not diet. Every single day I'd be like, I just want to diet. I just want to be lean. But I knew my body couldn't handle it. So there are a few things to draw from the experience. Hopefully some people can relate out there.
I'm sure they can. And you know what, by you expressing your story, like, I can totally relate to that as well. You have your ego and it's just like, let's get skinny, let's get that six pack, those lean, small legs to just feel good. But then your soul's just like, no, I prefer having ice cream when I want to and have that piece of chocolate and not feel guilty for it. So yeah, you know what, like, it's a total, it's a yin and yang with the fitness side of things and health. And sometimes you just have to sit back and be like, is it actually worth you going through that transition again to diet when mentally, you're not there just yet, and maybe you need to explore something else. Like what you said, you're exploring more of the accepting your body as it is right now, which I think is so beautiful. And so many young girls don't go through that enough because of, well, these days it could be social media, but, back in our days, it was magazines. Magazines are still around, but they're always feeding information, juice cleanse, detox, get the flat stomach, look good for summer, and then fat shaming celebrities when they gain weight. It's just like, how are you supposed to accept yourself when all of this is happening? So back to you accepting your body and the education, what have you done during this time to help that transition?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, it was about adding more traits and hobbies and habits to who I was as a person. So a lot of my identity came from me on social media, the image I had put out, being, a trainer, being someone who loves the gym. It was just the perfect storm of me getting an injury. So I couldn't even focus on performance-based results in the gym because I couldn't lift heavy because I had a hamstring tendinopathy. So I couldn't do the thing I loved most, which was heavy ass deadlifts.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult because I was like, well, I'm not able to train hard. I'm not currently able to diet. I'm on Roaccutane for my skin, which did a lot of things to my hormones, though I do have very nice skin now. Thank you.
You have beautiful skin.
Thank you. It's my favorite compliment at the moment. And yeah, it was just this combination of, I felt like I couldn't have any wins. Like I wasn't winning in any aspect of the things that were important to me. So I really had to think about, well, what's important to me and why? Like, why am I so obsessed with this image, this physical image? And a lot of that for me is tied into the feedback and the positive reinforcement that I get on social media and the negative comments that I get, because people would come in and be like, you're fat. I absolutely was not fat, but compared to my leaner self, I had gained fat. Yeah. So people were pointing this out, and that, negative comments tend not to affect me unless I believe them myself. So there was a period of me being quite depressed, really struggling to show up on social media, not sure how to share the content I wanted to share, worrying that if I did speak about the struggles I was going through, that I would lose credibility as a coach. People wouldn't trust me. They wouldn't want to be coached by me because it's like, well, she can't do what she's preaching, so why would she be able to help me? So that was what I had to sort of separate myself from. And I did that through doing things like meditation and journaling. I've always been into meditation, but I swapped from the previous app that I was using to Headspace. And there are some really great courses on there around food and your relationship with food and mindful eating and coping with cravings. And one of the elements of this weight gain was my relationship with food. So that was a really beneficial short course for me to do. A lot of reflection. So a lot of journaling and just trying to figure out where these thoughts were coming from. I've worked, so hard to rack my memory to find where this deep-seated obsession with looking a certain way, meaning I was worth a certain amount, came from, because I was never bullied in school. I was never, I didn't have unsupportive parents. I can't recall any comments from people commenting on my weight. But I remember ripping out from magazines, ab workouts and things. And I was tiny at school. I was a tiny little 50-kilo girl. Like there was never, there's not really much ammo there for me to find. So I just feel like it is a product of being surrounded by, like you said earlier, magazines and the ideal body image and fat shaming and fat phobia and, the positive reinforcement that came with being leaner and the confidence that came with that. So you put 2 and 2 together and you're like, oh, it must be that. And then that's just further reinforced with every step I've made basically in my career. So breaking through a lot of narratives that were essentially untrue. I really can't reiterate enough, just coming back to your core values and thinking about what's really important to you. And I know it sounds a bit like woo-woo or like you're like, how do I even do that? But I really sat down and I did this like pie chart kind of thing where I'm like, what is my life made up of? What are the things that bring me joy? And it's, splitting that up into training, obviously, helping women, building my business, connecting with people, my family, my friends. And then I was like, what's sort of lacking? And I was like, I don't have a lot of play. I have a lot of, work. I have a lot of content creation. So I have creativity there, but it was starting to feel like content creation was a chore because I really wasn't feeling it. So I kind of changed my approach with those things and tried to find more joy and fun and play in other aspects of my life that didn't relate to what my body looked like or felt like or had to perform like. So it could be something like, I don't know, going rollerblading or like I started doing yoga, and previously I've done yoga and it's always been, I've got to get into the deepest stretch, or I need to be like the best one at this. It was always trying to be the best I could at something. And I was like, well, no, this is just yin yoga. I can hold a position for 5 minutes. Doesn't need to be the deepest position. I challenge myself to do the easiest version of things, which sounds a bit backwards, but I was like, you need to reframe your mind for the reason that you're doing these things. And so now my focus is just health centric. So I'm like, what do I need to do? Like, I am currently in a deficit. I've been doing it for the last 7.5 weeks. It's been really successful in terms of my mental state throughout it. And of course, the actual weight I've lost has been significant. But every decision I've made along the way has been health centric. So I've been like, do I need a maintenance day today? Am I, I was kind of thinking, oh, do I want to continue this diet because it's been so successful? I'm like, is that the healthy choice? And it's like, you know what? The hardest part about any diet is the reverse diet. And whilst I'm feeling mentally strong, that's when I'm going to reverse diet. So it's not like, oh, you get to the end of the diet and you're like, it's done. It's like, no, now we're working because you're reverse dieting and practicing more restraint than ever. So they would be my hot tips. That was a long-winded way of sharing, but
I love it. It's so good. And I love the aspect that you jumped into the values, because many people don't understand the concept of that. And it can be broken into various ways. And I love the pie chart. I'm a very visual person, so I like looking at what's working, what's lacking. And you know what? Most people don't have enough playtime. And this comes down to being a coach as well. When you're not having fun, or you're not having enough fun, everything feels like a chore. And as online coaches, when we get creative, inspiration comes to you in the moment and you just go for it. You can't just plan on Monday and be like 9 till 11, I'm going to just write content. It's just like, it doesn't work that way. You're like, I'm getting ideas right now. I'm being inspired by us talking about what I could be writing or talking to my girls later on, and you possibly maybe thinking the same. And yeah, like I just feel people need to take a bit of a step back regarding their goals as well, which comes back to the values. And with the diets as well, like now you're back dieting, it's been 7 weeks and you're looking fucking amazing, and you're doing it completely different to what you did previously. So what's the difference? Well, what's the process that you're doing right now that's making it so successful compared to what you did a few years ago, or when you did bodybuilding and you put the weight back on?
So I wouldn't say the diet itself is that different. It was the prep before the diet. The fact that I spent time at maintenance, because historically I've either been dieting or not dieting. And when I was not dieting, I was like maybe following maintenance, but having days where, when I used to work in a shared office with some friends in Sydney, every Friday we had like donuts delivered, cookies delivered, and I just had no restraint. I'd be like, cool, I'm going to eat like 3 Nutella donuts, which actually to answer your earlier question, that is my favorite dessert. And yeah, I was, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to reiterate, there's nothing wrong with eating 3 donuts. But when you're someone who's just finished a diet, you're in quite a sensitive metabolic state. Regaining weight is very easy. And it wasn't like a one-off thing. And I wasn't sort of doing it in a way that meant I wasn't regaining a bunch of weight rapidly. So I regained the weight rapidly. And there was just this constant dieting to lose the weight I'd regained, and then being in a diet and not really following it properly, kind of struggling to be being adherent, and then sort of having days where I'd go over, and they were longer term diets. It was like, 4 months or something, I think was the last one I did. Whereas this one, it was short and sharp, 6 to 8 weeks, more aggressive than I've definitely done aggressive diets, but because it was short and sharp, it was more aggressive. And that's a personality thing. Some people are going to do better being in a more mild deficit for a longer period of time with a little bit more of a lifestyle approach, whereas others like myself can be very switched on. I'm just getting in and getting out, and I'm done with it. But it was the maintenance block where I really, like I said earlier, held myself there despite being very uncomfortable, but I was working on my gut health, on my hormones. I was working on my relationship with food. I was rehabbing my injury. I was not in a position to diet, even though I felt very uncomfortable. And I think it's important when anyone's dieting. Yes, there's going to be apprehension because you're like, oh, this is going to be a challenge, before anything hard, you're like, eek. But you also need to be excited for it. You need to be like, you know what? I am ready to diet. And that's how I knew, because I was like, every time I thought about it, I was like, oh, a bit like, I'm still sort of funny with food. And like, I'm still going over by say 100 calories, which isn't much at all, but it was, going over not when I was hungry. So that stuff I was working through. And then it got to the point where I was maintaining the weight I was at. I had been doing it for 6 months of pretty much every single day wanting to be in a deficit, but not really wanting to be like, do the work. And then it got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm ready. And I jumped into it. And from day one, I've just been like basically 100% adherent despite, being hungry. But all that work meant the diet was really successful. Like I basically primed my body to be able to respond like that. It wasn't like previous diets where I wasn't seeing results quickly because my body was used to being in and out of a deficit, and it was like just a bit more stubborn, and there was stress. So there was water retention. And then because I wasn't really seeing results, I wasn't being 100% adherent, and that's going to affect your results even further. And so doing that pre-work, mental and physical, is what's put me in the position I'm in today, which is 5.5 kilos down in 7.5 weeks, which is 12 pounds for anyone that's not metric. So it's been incredible. And it's been an incredible lesson in mindset and the power of doing that work, which if I was listening to this podcast 6 months ago, I'd be like, bullshit. As if you can work on your mindset to have a better, more successful diet, because I didn't know any other way than the way I did. And now I'm so freaking glad I went through that, because I can advocate for women sitting at maintenance, even when it's uncomfortable. And it's even like when women go into building phases, 2 weeks, 4 weeks in, they're like, oh, I'm gaining weight. I'm going to pull out of this. And it's like, no shit, you're gaining weight. You're eating in a surplus. That's not all going to be muscle.
You're supposed to.
Yeah. Even if it's, a mild surplus, it's not all going to go to muscle, but we need to have the longer term vision in mind. And that's something that's often lacking because we don't believe in ourselves. Even before this diet, I was like, the last diet I did didn't work. And it didn't work because I wasn't adherent and because I hadn't been at maintenance for a really long time. So this diet, I was like, oh, what if it doesn't work? Like, I'm nervous. And now reflecting on that, I'm like, well, there you go. If you just follow the process and you put in the groundwork beforehand, it does. And it's the same as, people in building phases. You really need to commit to that, because if you just do a 4-week build, you're just gaining unnecessary fat because you're not really going to be gaining muscle in 4 weeks. Yeah. And if you look at the long-term picture, if you want to build that muscle and then get leaner, that's the process you have to take. There's no way around it unless you want to be getting surgery. For that shape.
Nah, please don't. I love that concept that you mentioned about the mindset side of things, because that's a huge thing that I'm an advocate for, and I work that with my clients around that. In terms of the mindset side of things, what has been like the number one lesson with that, you going into your diet right now?
That is a good question, because there's not one standout thing that hasn't been said before. There are things that I've previously believed, like be flexible with your approach, don't be super restrictive, allow yourself things when you want them. Like those things still stand true today, but for some reason previously I'd say them and not really believe them. Like I believe them for other people, but for some reason I was an exception because I had some kind of standard that I was meant to live up to, which was, no, I hit everything perfectly when I wasn't. And this diet, I've been pretty close to 100% adherence every single day. There were probably like a few days I was under, a few days I was over, but nothing crazy. Nothing that I'm writing. I reflect every single night. I write in my journal. Nothing that I was writing in my journal at night being like, I need to do better tomorrow, which was a very common sentence that I would write in previous diets. Oh, tomorrow I'll do better. I'll be more disciplined. And then I wouldn't be. And it's like, well, what's going on really that's making you overeat? Stress, emotions, there's a lot of stress happening right now. Relationship with food, there's so many, where you're at in your cycle. These mindset things I already had. And, you know, it's a kind of a hard question to answer, because I feel like it really is all the pre stuff that I did around it, like with getting a better relationship with food. It's like something just clicked and everything's okay. And I think as well, knowing that this was a shorter term diet, like if I felt like I had, 12 weeks, so if I felt like I had 4 weeks to go, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna like start slacking off a bit. Like there's a bit to go. I can sort of make allowances here and there, which is, really common for people who diet. Your physiology is really working against you because it wants you to eat. And yeah, I guess that's, I'm sorry, I feel like I haven't really answered that question well, but I don't feel like there's one sort of mindset trick that's worked. But previously, if I have clients that come to me and they're like, I'm really struggling to stick to my diet, I'd be like, oh, here are some tips. Whereas now I'm like, do we need to go to maintenance? Like, is this worth it? Because I think we are in such a rush to get to where we want to be because we don't accept ourselves right now. And so even now I'm like, oh, that's the weight that I'm at, but my goal weight is actually, 3 kilos lighter and the diet's going so well. So I could just push. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so proud of how I've gone. That's enough. And I think you need to have that awareness to come back to how you're going against your values and against which my original thing was health centric, and be like, have I done this in a healthy way? Yes. Okay. So that's good enough. And yeah, so often we just keep trying to push, and it's like, what's the rush?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the rush, because that's something that I've personally experienced as well. I want to lose 5 kilos yesterday, and it's just like, well, that's not going to be realistic. You need to go through that process healthily. But where do you think this rush is coming from? Like, why are people just wanting the quick fixes?
I think there's a lot of contributing factors, but what we see, what we're exposed to, like right now, people on my social media are seeing a lean body, and all of a sudden there's interest. How did you get that? But the last 7 weeks worth of work, which I have been sharing, people weren't interested until they saw that it actually worked. So then people see that and they want that, but even though I was sharing the hard work every single day, they still don't see it. So we are in, a society where everything we want, we do get immediately. We get Uber Eats immediately. We get Amazon delivered immediately. People go viral and blow up on social media immediately, or all of a sudden have hundreds and thousands of followers. So we think it's possible. Therefore, if we're not achieving those results in this expected time frame, we're potentially not doing it right. And I think patience is one of those things that it's a skill that you learn and refine and you experience. And it's something that a lot of people don't have practice in, because a lot of people tend to give up on something before they see the results. And it's a lesson that you learn time and time again. And, being in my 30s, it's a lesson I've learned time and time again. And it'll come up as many times as it needs to until you learn it. And I'm still impatient. I started the diet and I was like, oh, I just want to see results already. Like I want to see evidence of my hard work. That's what it is. And, you take it a day at a time, a step at a time, and gradually it compounds and builds. And this is, something that we know. James Clear, thank you for bringing this to our attention. But like compounding habits over time build to the bigger result. And that's what's happened with me. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, it's so funny that at the start I was like so impatient, and now I'm here. And if you're impatient, you're missing out on life. You genuinely are. You're trying to speed through life and you're not really enjoying the actual journey and the process. And I know that sounds so tedious and something that we've heard before, but there's a reason we're all saying it, because that's life.
Yeah, exactly. You can't rush it. It's the process that you need to go through it. And yeah, James Clear, what an absolute legend for writing Atomic Habits. I've read that book like I reckon 4 times, and I've recommended that book to clients. I know you've actually recommended it to your clients as well, which is it's awesome. When we're looking at habits, what would you say are some of the habits that you've cultivated through this deficit that you're doing right now?
The thing, I'm really glad you asked that question, because something I was reflecting on this, and we actually put a post out on Train with Soph on it. And I think it's less about, for me, I'm going to separate this in two parts. For me, someone who already lives this lifestyle, and for someone who's maybe new. So for me, it was less about implementing new habits and more about habit amplification. So I already walk every single day and get 10,000 steps every single day. Therefore, I needed to increase the dial in order to increase my energy expenditure. So the habit I already had, walking every single day, went from 10,000 steps to 12,000 steps. And then further along, it went to 14 to 16,000 steps. My workouts stayed the same, but I had to continue to bring the intensity, because when you're in a deficit, you're losing energy and you become weaker and it's harder to push. So it was about increasing my mental strength and really pushing and digging deep in those workouts. Going to bed early, getting enough sleep, journaling. These are all habits that I already have, but you either dial them up or dial them down. I was already eating 3 meals and a snack a day, but I just had to dial down the amount of food I was actually getting. For people who are newer and who haven't been exposed to this lifestyle before, obviously there's going to be an element of introducing and or changing current habits. So current habits that don't serve you, sitting around all day. How can we change that? You don't have to do 10,000 steps a day. If you're getting 3,000, add 2,000 to that. So that could be a 5-minute walk in the morning. That's one thing I changed just when I was doing my walk. I'd get up earlier and go for a walk in the morning to get a chunk of steps done and out of the way. And that really helped me, because nothing worse than getting to 5 o'clock at the end of your day and being like, cool, I've got 3,000 steps done. I have to go for over an hour's walk now. It's the last thing I want to do. So yeah, people, I think it's important to slowly and incrementally bring in these habits so as to not overwhelm, and to create a lifestyle with habits that you actually like. Like, I love going for a walk. I don't love it every day. I don't wake up at 5:30 and go, yes, I can't wait to go for a walk in the rain. It's cold and it's dark and it's foggy. I have to put a beanie on and I just want to stay in bed. But I get up and I get to the beach where I am and I'm like, wow, this sunrise over the water is freaking cool. Like this morning, it was a bit of a dig. And I was like, okay, if I'm already wishing this walk was over, how can I change my mindset? And I was like, I get to walk to the beach. Like, the beach, how cool is that?
What a blessing.
Exactly. And I flipped that around and I was like, this is awesome. The morning routine, it's my favorite part of the day. So try and extract that joy again. But yeah, I think people get overwhelmed. They're like, where do I start? How do I get healthy? How do I get results? And it's like, well, what kind of life do you actually want to lead? Do you want to go for a walk? Do you hate walking? Do you want to run instead? Do you like resistance training? Do you want to do a class? Do you want to do Pilates? It doesn't matter how you do it, unless you have specific body composition goals of, say, building muscle. Obviously, we have to resistance train, but it matters that you enjoy it, because enjoyment is how we stay consistent with something.
Consistency is key, 100%. Yeah, I totally love that. Let's switch it. Like, I really wanted to chat about your journey from, your previous diets, but also your journey from, going through your endo surgery as well, and the process around that, and then how you began your fitness journey, became a PT and online business owner. So, well, I guess, the first question is, for our listeners who don't know, what was your journey from that start, when you were diagnosed with endo and you had to go through that surgery?
So how old was I? I think I was 20 years old, and I'd always had painful periods, but I thought it was normal, because everyone gets their period and goes, oh, like, it's so painful. So you're like, oh, okay, you don't know that your level of pain is significantly higher than someone else's, until, I was at college at the time and I was going to the toilet and I felt like I was going to vomit and pass out simultaneously. And I was like, this can't be right. And I went to my friends and I was like, does this happen to you? And they were like, no. So I was like, all right, I better go to the doctor. And I went to the doctor, and you know what? I'm really surprised that they were kind of onto it, because I hear of a lot of women going to the doctor and them really talking it down or saying, oh, just go on the pill, which is infuriating. Yeah. So I went to the doctor and they were like, okay, we'll do some ultrasounds and then we'll go from there. You might need to see a gynecologist. So I saw a gynecologist. I got some ultrasounds done. It was just like an internal ultrasound. I didn't really see a lot there. And when I saw the gynecologist, he was like, yeah, we're going to have to do, it sounds like could be endometriosis. We're going to have to do, like, the only way to diagnose it is by doing keyhole surgery. So they make 2 incisions. They go in with a little microscopic camera. They check it out. If there's anything in there, they make 2 further incisions and they burn it off or remove it, however they plan on removing it. So I was like, okay, sounds like minimally invasive. It's a day surgery. I was so nervous. I literally had this horrible phobia of needles, like ever since I was a kid. I couldn't stomach them. And I was really nervous, but it was like, you have the whatever, it puts you to sleep and you wake up and it's done. And I was like, okay, cool. So I had that, woke up, was like, cool. Yep. They found endometriosis. It was only mild. There was a bit of scar tissue in there. We'll go through the results in a week when you come back. So I went home to recover, and recovery was really painful. I sort of progressed, and then I started to regress in terms of like I vomited, which I was like, oh, it's probably the anesthesia wearing off. My stomach was distended because they fill it with gas, and I've someone I'd spoken to at work had said it was super painful, so my expectation was set that it was super painful. So I was like, this is normal, right? And then my breathing was getting shallower. I kind of stopped going to the toilet. I stopped having energy to get up and move. Like moving was painful. And it's just so weird to look back. And I was staying with my mum, and my mum reflects and she's like, I can't believe I didn't like take you to the hospital sooner, because we just thought it was normal. Like we didn't know. And I downplayed it. And I was like, oh, my pain's maybe like a 5 out of 10.
But realistically, it was like a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. So by the time we went back, my stomach was like so distended. It hurt to move. The drive from Geelong, which is, a town in Melbourne in Victoria, to Melbourne was about an hour, and we had to push the seat back, and I was lying on the seat, and the tiniest bump in the road was agony. And by the time we got back, the gyno was like, something doesn't seem right. And it's like, no shit, mate. And then he was like, we'll take you to day surgery. We'll run some tests. So we ran some tests, and then they took me over to the hospital, and the general surgeon walked in and took one look at me and was like, emergency surgery literally now. And so I don't know why the gynecologist didn't pick up on that. Maybe he was too proud and couldn't admit that he'd made a mistake. So I went into emergency surgery. Turns out he'd perforated my bowel in the initial surgery. I was dying. All of the, bacteria and shit literally was floating around my body. Peritonitis shuts down your organs and you die. So there was literally infection all through my body. And they eventually found the teeny tiny puncture in my bowel, stitched it up. I was in intensive care for 2 weeks, and we thought I was getting better. It was over Christmas and New Year's and everything. And such a joyous time to be in hospital. And then I just kept getting worse. And then they found the infection had spread to my lungs. So I then had to get lung surgery. And then that extended my stay in hospital for another 2 weeks. I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair. I wasn't eating. I was being fed through a drip. Countless surgeries and procedures later, I got out of hospital, and recovery's been long. And I have a giant scar from my belly button down to just above my pubic bone. And, all I wanted in that hospital was to be strong and healthy. Like I hadn't started my fitness journey at this point, and people would come in and they're all tanned and healthy looking and strong, and I was this pale sheet of like bones. And I was like, I just want to get healthy. And I remember asking the dietitian at the hospital, what can I do to, like, what should I be eating? And she was like, oh, just eat whatever, just as long as you're getting enough protein. And I was like, oh, that's really helpful, thanks. So yeah, that's my endo journey. And then for the last, 10, 12, however long years, I've been working with naturopaths and stuff to help manage the pain and the symptoms, which has been really good, because no sort of Western medicine has been that helpful. And I'm definitely not getting that surgery again.
Definitely not. Yeah, I've heard many complications around those surgeries. And again, I guess it's like a 50-50 chance. Like those who do go through it, like yourself, go through that fear. Is it actually going to work? Is it going to be beneficial? And then there's the other half who go the other way, whether it's just medication or go through that natural path. And you know what? Kudos to naturopaths, acupuncturists, like they're just amazing. Like I absolutely love their job. And, for women like yourself who have suffered with endo pain, it's no joke, you know, like it's something that people, like a lot of people need to realize that we don't just carry this pain and pretend, oh, I have my period, so I'm just going to, you know, take advantage of this because I'm a woman. It's like, no, it's legit excruciating, I can't pronounce that name, word. It's painful. And I love how you mentioned also that when you were in hospital, you literally just wanted to become strong and healthy again. And that obviously inspired you to take control of your health, and you went into the fitness and health industry. Let's dabble a little bit into that. Like, I know you began as a PT, and then you built the the TWS community. So I would love to know a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, so it's funny, you know, I did just want to be so healthy after hospital, but, you know, the first 5 years after that, I also traveled a lot and drank a lot. So it didn't happen immediately. I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, oh, but you had a reason. And I'm like, no, I actually went and did a lot of damage to myself.
I did the
5 years following that. I lived. So, and then, the kind of 5 years after that was me more so picking up the pieces. So I actually never started as a PT in person. I was always, as I said at the start, working in corporate. I was working in offices, and alongside that, I was training and just really becoming obsessed and passionate about training and fitness and health and everything associated with it. And I, alongside that, had started building my social media account, and I was really just sharing my journey to getting fit and strong, and it was very weight loss focused. And I connected with a lot of people, you know, a lot of people working in gyms and PTs, and I learned a lot, and I, you know, tapped into the education side of things and realized the importance of learning and upskilling and putting out correct information. So I'm, you know, really glad that I was exposed to those kinds of people, because you see so many PTs go through and just do the course and kind of start and then not really upskill or learn or realize the importance of staying up to date with relevant evidence and research papers and doing short courses and bettering yourself. Like any skill, it's something that has to be continuously refined.
Yeah, for sure.
So I never started, and pretty much anyone that started social media back in 2015 or like that kind of early adopters it wasn't a career path like it is now. Being a creator wasn't a thing. Being an influencer was still the very early days. So it really was born out of a passion for sharing something. And, you know, nowadays people start because they want to build a business off it, which is totally fine. And so great that we have this tool to do that. So I was never like, oh, cool, I'm going to build this to a point and then I'm going to monetize it and build a business off of it. I never considered myself to be a business savvy kind of person. I just thought I'd be working my way up the ranks in whatever career path I chose to be in, but I just wasn't passionate about it. I didn't work super hard, and I was like, is there something wrong with me? Am I like lazy? But I just didn't love what I was doing. And then, as my account started to build, I was connecting with more people. I connected with a friend who she'd gone off from her fitness account and started her own guides and stuff. And she really instilled that confidence in me to go and do it myself. So I quit my job. At this point, I think I had like 100,000 followers or something, and, you know, which is quite a lot. And it was a lot back then. And I started out just doing like one-on-one coaching, and then I would open up spots for people and write programs for them. And then from there, I was like, you know, this is taking a lot of time and it's not allowing me to do anything else creative outside of just serving these one-on-one clients. Now there are so many different ways to do that, but I created ebooks. And so that was really good passive income. So I could make money while sort of planning my next step without having to give so much of my time to one-on-one stuff. And that's what I did. I started, it changed from being Soph Active Life, which was my original handle, to then Train with Soph. And I'm actually just going through another rebrand, which will be launching later this year. But building that community and creating the fitness app that I currently have, and the platform, the membership platform, and helping women, and just being really focused with what kind of impact exactly I want to have. So that's how that started, and I'm not going to lie and say, I mean, I'm very lucky and fortunate to have a following to back me, to have the confidence to do that. But obviously that took me, 5 years to build.
Years of work, consistency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Posting twice a day, every day for that 5 years. Only now I've just dropped back to posting every 2 to 3 days. And it's just been an absolute joy.
I love that. It's so good. For the coaches who are listening and for those who are wanting to be coaches, what is some advice that you can give for them in terms of, creating content? Because I feel that's something that I'm constantly having chats with other coaches, or other coaches are asking me. So yeah, let's open that conversation a little bit. What is it that you're doing right now that could maybe benefit someone else to do as well?
I think there's a lot of different strategies out there. There are a lot of different opinions about what works and what doesn't work, and the algorithm, and there's a lot of noise out there, and different things are going to work for different people, for different niches, for different areas, for different categories. So obviously we're talking about fitness. The best way to sort of showcase yourself is, in my opinion, to show that you're credible, to show that you know your stuff, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. People want to connect with someone, so it's really good to have a personal brand for something that you stand for. I think there's this, hype around being different. I just think that there's too much out there to try and focus on what's my point of difference. I mean, you're your point of difference, I think. So we're all, we all have the same goal, helping people to be healthy and confident in themselves, and we're all going to be doing it differently. But I think when it comes to content creation, it is, a lot of people are really nervous about it. They're like, what if, I get a lot of DMs a day being like, oh, what if my friends sit and laugh at me, or I've got no followers, so it's just going to land on deaf ears, or I don't really know what to speak about, I'm nervous to get in front of the camera. And it's advice that you've already heard before, but you just have to start, and you kind of have to accept that, like with me at the start of my diet, I wasn't going to see results on day 1. I wasn't going to see results on day 7. I'm seeing results, down the track at day 51. And it's the same as creating content. You can't just do something once and expect to see results. So you need to be consistent. And a really good way to do that is to batch your content. So like you were saying, you have days where you're like, oh, I have to be creative between, 9 and 11. It just doesn't work like that. I actually have days where I'm so inspired, and I just pull up my notes in my phone or my computer, and I just write out a whole lot of ideas, so that when I'm down and out and I've got nothing, I just access that and I'm like, cool, that's one I can create. That's one I can do. For me, what's worked really well, 2 things. One, sharing my journey. So I feel like showing that you can walk the talk.
Connection.
Yeah. And more so, back then it was really very transformation based, and I feel like transformations have lost a bit of sort of oomph now, because there's a movement against transformations. But I think if you can show, okay, what I do gets results, then people, that layer of trust is created. And then workouts, in terms of people seeing your training style, the way you train, they're going to save that, they're going to like it, they're going to use it, they're then going to come back because they like it. Instagram likes people that save content, and now we've got reels out. I think for smaller accounts, reels are really beneficial to use. I don't know if they're great for bigger accounts. I haven't had a ton of success with them. I think testing any of the new features that Instagram brings out, if we're specifically speaking to Instagram, I'm obsessed with TikTok. I just love it. It's so easy to grow. I've literally grown to 100,000 in 2 months just because I've been consistent.
I have no idea how to use it.
I didn't either. Neither did I. Don't let it be an excuse.
There you go. I'm going to put it down on my list.
I was so resistant to starting, because I went on there and I'm like, it's dancing. What the F? And then as the algorithm starts to learn your behavior, I was interacting with fitness accounts, and that's what it started showing me more of. And then I was like, well, I can put my own flair on this. And so I share educational content, because it's kind of like Instagram circa 2000, where there's not a lot of education. It's not saturated yet. So it's really easy to grow. So like I said, 100,000 in 2 months from being consistent. That's not even from channeling my Instagram and being like, guys, come follow me. It's just, I'm new on TikTok. People don't know who I am, but I've got the results and the knowledge to sort of back myself. So just start. Don't become obsessed with your content looking perfect. I still use my iPhone and a tripod.
Same. Love my iPhone camera. So good.
Yeah, exactly. And, content is a 24 to 48 hour window cycle, and then it's gone. Like, you put hours and hours of time into creating the perfect content, and then it's like, well, that's done and you have to create a new piece. So you need to be unattached to it being perfect. And as you practice more, you'll get better and you'll be able to edit better, or you'll be able to pay someone to do it for you. So don't get bogged down in the details. But I think coming up with a really step-by-step actionable plan, because people look at something and they go, okay, today's to-do list, create content. No one wants, like, what does that even mean? Like, break it down, bite-sized pieces. All right, today I need to create one workout video that is focused on glutes from home. How much easier is that now, your direction with what you need to do, than today I have to create content? So get
being more specific
with your steps. Take the steps. And then as you start to do that, you'll get feedback from what people are engaging with. You'll see what people like to see. You'll see what you enjoy creating. Don't forget, you need to enjoy what you're creating, because you'll get to the point. Because you'll get to the point where you're like, why am I putting out this shit? Now I have to pivot. And that's annoying, because then you're kind of going from scratch. So they would definitely be my tips. Just starting, being really clear with what you want to do, not being obsessed with it being perfect, batching your content, collaborating with people, see what works for other people, but don't copy off other people. Don't be you.
Get inspired.
Do what works for you and what aligns with you. There's nothing worse than, having content that goes really well and being like, oh, that wasn't actually mine. So just do your own thing, and know that people are going to connect with you for you. Like, what is, I don't know, I was going to say what's different about you, but like I said at the start, you don't need to be different to people. You just need to be you, and you just need to create stuff that you like, because that will come through in your content.
Totally. I love that. And we all are uniquely different, and my quirks are going to be different to Soph's quirks, and my training skills are going to be different. But again, and that comes down to also not comparing yourself to other people. I can't compare my experience to yours. You can't compare your experience to someone above you, because it's just ridiculous. We're living two different lives. I think I hope, I know it's been very helpful for me, and I'm sure the listeners are, getting inspired regarding this. My last question for today is, what is your biggest advice for a PT or someone who's wanting to jump into the online business?
So moving from being a PT on the floor to getting online?
Yeah.
I think different personalities are going to want to approach this differently. Some people are going to be cautious and slow and steady and dip their foot in the water and maybe take a few online clients whilst still doing their one-on-one PTs. Some are just going to want to jump in straight away and be like, I'm going all online. COVID has absolutely forced a lot of people to switch it up and pivot and go online only and come up with systems. And, it's being forced to get into that space. But I think, coming back to thinking about who your ideal client is, the kind of person you want to be helping, not just saying yes to everyone and anyone. I think it's really important to have systems set up. So, when you start getting busy, it can be really easy to push these things to the side, like, save all your files to desktop and not have a proper filing system, or not having boundaries around how you do check-ins or how accessible you are to your clients. Like, that's a quick trip to burnout town. So you want to have, rules and boundaries and structures in place that can be really hard to figure out when you're first starting and you're like, who do I even talk to for this? But I think, you learn as you move forward, and kind of like the content creation piece, don't be obsessed with getting everything perfect now. If you don't have an app, that is fine. Like, not many people have apps. They're bloody expensive. You can, use Excel spreadsheets. You can get a graphic designer really cheap on Fiverr or Upwork to do some templates for you if you want to do that. You can set up like a formula system on Excel. And then as you start building your clients and getting their testimonials and getting really good transformations, providing them value, that's super important. Make sure you're providing value so they keep coming back, and then word of mouth. You'll have a wait list going. And then as you build that out, then maybe you're going to take coaches on board so that you can focus more on business stuff. So creating content, getting more clients to come in. Maybe you come up with an online portal where you're creating education, and there's like different tiers and structures with your coaching. You've got your one-on-one, which is your premium, and then you've got your kind of bigger thing, which is cheaper, and you get people in there who access your, I don't know, templated programs that are available. And then that's how you start building out a big business. But you're not focusing on that Everest. You're focusing on the very first step you got to take, which is setting up your structures and your systems, your rules, your payment systems, how that's going to work, how you're going to promote yourself. And like I said, with the content, take it back to the very first step. And it's not step one, start business. It's okay, step one, I'm going online. I need to come up with a system. Do I want to use Excel spreadsheets? Do I want to use Google Docs? Am I going to go and get Trainer Eyes or something like that? So just be really clear with your goals and your strategies. And that way you've got action points every single day, and before you know it, you'll be like, cool, now my next step is building an app. Now I got to figure that out, and come to me when you're ready to do that.
I love that. Yeah, just starting baby steps. And I love that you mentioned just start from square one. You don't have to get all these fancy systems in. Like Excel spreadsheets is how I started as well. I used to just send out my programs like that, and eventually you just do it through an app. But also an important one is setting out boundaries. Again, like don't set an expectation to your clients that you're there all the time, because that's the expectation that is going to fail you down the track, because you're going to burn out, because people are going to expect your energy ongoing. So yeah, setting boundaries is a huge one. Well, that's a lesson that I've learned over the years as well. Yeah, huge one, huge. Awesome. This has been fab. I've loved this chat. Seriously, so good. Thank you so much for joining us, Soph. And for those who want to find out a little bit more about Soph, you can find her on her Instagram at Soph Allen, or her business page on Instagram is Train with Soph. Before we finish up, girls, make sure that you screenshot when you watch this podcast. Screenshot the Women's Fitness Academy podcast, as well as my Instagram name, Sig Fisher, and also Soph's page, so we know that you've watched this. And yeah, like DM us, give us some reviews, tell us if you loved it or not. And we really hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. Until next time, bye.
Bye.